Hello and welcome back to You and I for the Kenai. I'm Aaron and I'm back today with Cobran recording another great recovery story. Today we're here with Richard. Richard, how are you today, man?
I'm great.
Doing great?
Doing awesome.
Nice. Yeah, so let's just dive right in here. Where are you from, Richard?
So, born in Washington State, grew up there until I was 16 years old, moved up here to Alaska, and I've been here ever since. So, I'm 51 years old now, so I've been here
A while.
going on 35 years, I think.
What brought you up? You said you were 16?
Yeah, I was a senior in high school, and my family decided
At
to
16?
move up here. Yeah, I was a junior, going to be a senior next year. Yeah, and my dad, we owned a few businesses in Washington. My dad owned a glass store and a Texaco station, and we decided to come to Alaska for work. We lived in a logging community, and they were shutting down the woods, and so economics were really bad there. So we was promised a job in Alaska, and we moved here. And when we got here, times were pretty tough for our family. He didn't get a job right away like he was promised, and living in a tent in a camper, and but sometimes that's good for families go through a little rough time.
Yeah. So where'd you grow up in Washington?
So I was born in Olympia and lived in Aberdeen, and lived there until I was in kindergarten. Then we moved to a town called Montesano, and I lived there until 6th grade, and then I moved from there to a place called Raymond, which is down on the Olympic Peninsula, and went to a place called Willapa Valley High School, involved in sports, and a little bit of everything there.
Yeah.
I played Little League as a kid, and I was involved in Cub Scouts, just your normal childhood, really. I mean, I had a lot of opportunities as a kid, and a lot of really neat experiences. My dad managed about a 200-acre private campground when I was a kid. In addition to running his glass business, we lived there. Had a Olympic-sized swimming pool and lots of roads and stuff. We had dirt bikes and you name it. I mean, it was pretty good childhood, really. Did a lot of berry picking and mushroom hunting, stuff like that, always in the outdoors. And yeah, I had a pretty good childhood, other than, grew up in an alcoholic home.
Yeah.
And so that was a little traumatic for a kid, just my dad I would call him a binge drinker, so he would go on a binge and knowing he was coming home, and my mom, she didn't handle that well at all.
Yeah.
She
puts a lot of tension on a family.
Yeah, she didn't know how to handle his situation at all, so it would always become a confrontation, as much her as him, and so I grew up listening to the arguments and the fights, and just remember being scared as a kid where that was concerned. Always told myself, I'm never going to be an alcoholic.
Right.
So ending up being an alcoholic and a drug addict, it was a tough pill to swallow. Really tough pill, So.
Did that get any better coming to Alaska, or was it about the same?
Well, my alcohol use didn't start until probably about a year before we came to Alaska. I had a really good friend growing up, and his sister was graduating from high school, and I hadn't touched alcohol until I was, I'm thinking I was 14 or 15. I was 15. And my dad had gotten sober when I was 14 years old. He quit drinking and started going to AA, and our life was pretty good at home after that. I mean, I've seen some real
a sense
changes.
of calm.
Yeah, most definitely.
Clouds parted over the rocky waters a little bit. Huh?
Yeah, I've seen some real positive changes in my dad. And I remember just I came home one day, and my dad had went to AA, and there was this guy with him in the yard, and this guy was real rough looking. He had all kinds of tattoos and stuff, and I was looking at this guy, and I'm thinking, who is this guy with my dad? Because my dad didn't hang out with guys like that, you know. I'm like, what's going on? My dad's like, hey, this is my sponsor, you know. And I'm like,
cool.
well, what's that? Well, he's going to help me with, you know, not drinking, and I'm thinking, how is this guy going to help my dad?
Right.
I was like, you could help him out, Dad, with whatever's happening.
Exactly. Exactly. The guy was a painter by trade, and but it really made a difference, just softened my dad's heart, you know, just made some real big changes in him. And I seen that, so I knew there was answers in AA. You know, I knew that there was solutions there. I was saying when I was 14 years old. So my friend's sister had a graduation party, and ended up at the graduation party, and my friend was sneaking beers from the keg and drinking them, and he kept trying to encourage me, hey, come on, try this, you know. So I did. I remember getting the red Solo cup, you know.
And but I mean, like, that's what kind of, you know, separates, I guess, people with, like, from a genetic disposition to alcoholism, is like, that's socially fairly normal, in air quotes, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people, 14, 15, you're hitting adolescence, like, your curiosity's starting to peak, like, you're freshman in high school, you know, that's like, oh, you're in high school now, it's this, it's that, like, you're allowed to party, like, we assume it to be, like, a socially acceptable part of high school, almost like a coming of age thing.
It was a socially acceptable part of the community I lived in.
Yeah.
You know, it was a logging community, and farmers and tough kids, you know.
Right.
If you didn't take part in sports and bust some heads on the football field, you might as well not go to that school, you know.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way it was, and drinking was just a part of it, you know.
Yeah.
I avoided it for a long time, and when I did try it, you know, I got the most amazing feeling from it, you know. I lightened up. I became entertaining. My friend was laughing. I remember we were laughing and carrying on, and I felt, probably for one of the first times in my life, kind of felt normal. You know, I had a real awkward childhood, didn't get along with kids, and just found it really hard to make friends. And that lightened it up, you know. And but at the same time, it scared me a little bit, you know. I didn't overindulge that time, but definitely got to that spot, that sweet spot, where I was feeling really good. You know, probably the only time in my life where I ever got to that sweet spot and stopped.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
We ended up moving to Alaska, like I said, and when we got here, I convinced my parents that I needed to go live at the cannery in a tent. There was a campground there at the cannery, because if I was close to the cannery, I would get more work, you know.
And more freedom.
And honestly, that was my intention in the beginning. And once I got there and seen all the partying going on, why, I jumped right in.
Right.
You know, I was 16 years old, just got my driver's license, drove my Volkswagen Bug to Alaska, and had it down at the cannery with me, had a tent set up there, and a bunch of college kids around, and so I started partaking. And I remember the first time I drank up here, I got severely drunk. You know, I didn't intend to do that, but it's what happened. You know,
Yeah.
I started drinking the beer, and I was drinking Southern Comfort whiskey, I remember, and just got extremely intoxicated, and behaviors came out that are really embarrassing.
I feel that.
Very, very embarrassing. I wandered through the campground telling all the Mexican workers that were here that they needed to go back to Mexico, that they were taking Americans' jobs, Alaskans' jobs. And my sister, she was here for the summer. She was a college student, and she was trying to stop me. And I remember being very, very embarrassed the next day, and all them people avoiding me. You
Right.
know?
Some very immediate consequences.
Oh, immediate.
Yeah.
Immediate. And but it didn't stop me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would continue to drink, and well, I'm not going to get like that.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna ask, like, what was the next time like? You know, so you go, really like, well, your first time partying in Alaska, and it sounds like when you're first time partying overall, one of the 1st occasions, and right away you hit some very immediate consequences. And the next time you go and like the party's starting, like, what do you tell yourself the second time?
I tell myself I'm going to drink because it feels good. When I get to that spot where I feel good, I'm funny. I get along with people. I'm socially acceptable. I'm going to get to that spot, and I'm gonna feel good. You know,
You're
I'm
gonna
be
stay
a
there,
part
right?
of the crowd, and I'm going to stay there. I'm not going to get carried away.
Yeah. I feel that, I think, a little too spiritually, honestly. Because, like, the plan always sounds so easy. You know, I think that's the thing, like, when you have an addictive personality is, like, logically it makes sense. Because you see people do it, you know what I mean? It's not an undoable thing where, like, people, you know, they can drink responsibly. Like, so people have the ability to drink responsibly. And it's, like, it's almost like kind of a, I don't know, I guess this is maybe me projecting, but, like, it creates almost, like, a sadness that, like, you come to realize that you might not be that kind of normal. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh, I'll just, once I start to feel good, I'll stop. And then I start to feel good, and you feel so good, then you don't want to stop.
Like, what if I had more? Then
Yeah.
I'll feel better. Wrong.
Right.
At some point,
Yeah.
you're wrong. You're so
Yeah.
wrong. But
At some point, the
I always end
blackness
up
hits, and
wondering
it's
how
not
you
a good
get there.
time.
You know how you get to that point. You know, because you don't intend to.
Yeah.
But it ends up there, and I was being offered drugs at the time, and I avoided them. No. I'm not going to have anything to do with drugs. No marijuana, none of that. None of the other drugs that were around, and considered it a matter of pride for myself. You know, I never touched drugs.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I never
Yeah.
touched drugs, but I drink the alcohol. You know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
almost like it was acceptable. My dad had drank. The community I grew up in were drinkers. You know, I mean, lots of drinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And so drinking was almost acceptable, but drugs definitely not.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to touch that.
Mhm.
So,
And I think that's
kinda-
a fairly common misconception too. You know what I mean? Like, where like, as you sit back with the beer in your hand, you're drinking. You know, it's like, but you should never do drugs. You know,
Yeah.
when in reality, depending on your personality and you know some of the things that lead up to why you're drinking, could be just as dangerous.
well, and alcohol is
Or more
literally a drug,
dangerous. Oh,
pretty much.
yeah.
I mean, in its own way,
It
we
is,
kind of
no,
put it
yeah.
into a different category, but
I've seen people on alcohol do a lot more crazy and insane stuff and hurt people than I have, you know, smoking marijuana or, you know,
Right.
I've never seen anybody on marijuana kill somebody or, you know what I'm saying?
Right?
I'm just-
Yeah, and yeah, a
I'm
lot less violent behavior
not
typically.
justifying that behavior, but it's definitely from the environment I came to work in. I seen that, you know.
Right.
especially when it's everywhere. You know,
Mhm.
it's like you have tap water, you got the lemonade, you got the whiskey, and it's just regular addition to the house.
Right.
You know, and I think as people become more comfortable with it, it's like, yeah, you know, it's not that big of a deal.
Mhm.
And then you're like, you know what, these maybe the thought process behind the people who were out partying with you is like, well, this kid's working at a cannery, he's working like an adult, he should be able to drink like an adult.
Right.
Like, he's doing real manual labor. You know, it's not a joke in the canneries.
Right.
I've definitely heard about it, and yeah, I guess that mentality leads to I guess irresponsible behaviors and kind of that group.
And I think that's part of what makes it so dangerous. You know, maybe like you said, maybe more dangerous than a lot of like either other drugs or illicit substances is, you know, like that it's so socially acceptable.
Right.
That it's like it seems so much easier to get wrapped up in alcoholism than these other things because like you get to a certain age, and for some parents and people, it is like in certain communities. Like I grew up in a similar community, like in rural Montana, where you know most of the kids are farming kids, blue collar working kind of people, and it is very much part of, like, I would even say, like, the community fabric. You know what I mean? Like, where, like, humans are such social beings. Like, where do we go to gather? Go to the bar.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where do you go watch football on Sundays? The bar. You know what I mean? What do you do after your kid's football game on Friday night? You go to the bar. Like,
Right.
high school sports, drinking beer, and then working hard. Like, that's in
Exactly.
air quotes. You know, like, that's kind of like, that becomes the fabric and a lot of part of, like, your identity.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You kind of, like, separate these things, like, oh, drugs are over here, but alcohol's over here, and that's okay.
Exactly.
When it's really not that much different. Like, it can still bring out some behaviors that you're not necessarily going to be proud of come
Exactly.
tomorrow.
You know, I grew up watching my dad work really hard, and if I got anything from my dad, I got a work ethic from him. You know, and it's almost like you feel like you deserve to take that break or something.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you know, working at the cannery, I was productive. Within a short time of being there, the bosses there made me a foreman. Even, you know, I'm a senior in high school. I'm a foreman in the cannery and running a crew, and you know, just partying it away when I wasn't working. You know, I remember working for days on end sometimes. You know, I remember being on the clock one time for 3 days straight as a senior in high school. They actually allowed that back then. I can't even imagine that. As long as you
Right.
could stand there and push a button, they'd allow you to work, you know. And so, yeah, you get to feeling like you deserve a break.
Right.
So, and, yeah, always like I say, gonna stop. And as far as that level of intoxication and always going beyond that. So I went to high school up here my senior year and graduated from Kenai High School. And shortly after graduating from high school, I became a swimming instructor and a lifeguard instructor, and taught kids how to swim for a while, probably about a year and a half period. And I started my own business. I started a landscaping business.
Cool.
Out of my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
My boss at the pool was one day just talking. She's like, "I'm putting out the landscape bids," and I'm like, "What's that?" You know. And she's like, "Well, we got this guy that does the lawn care around here, but he doesn't do a good job. You know, we were looking for somebody new." I'm like, "Well, can anybody bid
Right.
on that?" You know.
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, why don't you send one of them bid packets to," and I named off the name of my company, you know, so I get right off the top of my head. You know?
Right.
She's like, "Well, who's that?" I said, "That's me," you know. She's like, "Oh, okay." So she sends me this bid packet, and I go and look up all the public information. It was all public information on how much the guy was making, so I bid like $5 less than him for all the
Nice.
services.
He was like, "This is ridiculous."
It turned lucrative, though, you know.
Yeah.
I turned that. And then I was stuck. You know, I didn't have a big cash roll. My dad, like I said, wasn't employed right away up here. You know, so he couldn't help me out to get a tractor. You know, and a fireman took me and put a Sears Craftsman tractor on his credit card for me. The guy just out of the niceness of his heart, you know, and so I started that business with a Craftsman tractor and a push mower and a weed eater, and did all the other work by hand, the aerating and thatching and watering, everything, you know, and was making pretty good money doing that. And then I noticed there was a couple of schools out north Kenai, so I contacted the contractor for the borough, and I'm like, "Why don't you let me subcontract those from you?" You know, he's like, "Yeah, it don't really pay me to go all the way north Kenai," you know. So then I started doing work for him, and we got kind of sideways, me and him. He didn't want to pay me for my work, and because he wasn't doing proper work at the time for the borough, and he told me he was going to withhold some of my money, and I told him, "Well, go ahead and keep my money, and next year I'll take them contracts from you." You know, I was just a kid. You know, he's like, "Yeah, right." You know. Well, I ended up bidding on them. We turned that landscaping business. And my little brother worked for me, and we turned that into an opportunity where we had, geez, I don't know, at one time we were probably making $750,000 a year on it. You know, I mean, it was very, very lucrative.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know? and
Very, very lucrative.
and
Especially
well,
when you're 19 and got a habit.
yeah, in the meantime,
It's a good time.
exactly, you know, I mean, I'm drinking when I can, but not. It's not an everyday occurrence, you know. It's like on the weekend I might go party with friends or something, you know, and
So it actually sounds like it's kind of slowing down once you get busy.
when I get
Yeah.
busy and staying extremely busy, yeah,
Mhm.
I didn't find time for it,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and so I'm 19 years old, and I tell my dad. My dad had gotten a job in corrections. He was working as a correctional officer in Anchorage at 6th Avenue Jail, and he got transferred down to Kenai eventually within a year of being hired. And I told him, I think I'm going to apply for that job. You know, he's like, they're never going to hire you at 19 years old. You know, I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm going to try. I said, I'm going to go take the test and see what. So I took the test and ended up with an interview. I was going to join the Navy. I was going to join the Navy, and I had really high ASVAB scores. I scored really high in mathematics and sciences, and they wanted me in the nuclear power program
Mhm.
for the Navy, and I was going to go do that. And just a piece of me thought, you know what? They're promising me the moon, and I don't know I'm going to get it.
Mhm.
I'm going to apply for this state job and see what happens. Well, they ended up opening up Spring Creek Correctional Center down in Seward. It was the first maximum security prison in the state of Alaska. They brought all the people who had a lot of time to do. They used to send them out to the Federal Bureau of Prisons down south, and so they ended up filing a lawsuit, and they all got the right to come back to Alaska. Well, they didn't have any place to hold them.
Right.
No maximum security prison, so they built one, and they hired a whole bunch of new people.
Yeah.
And I actually got hired I had just turned 20 years old and got hired as a correctional officer.
Wow.
So I decided not to join the Navy, and I decided that was going to be a career for me.
Mhm.
And it's kind of, in that career, the camaraderie, people that were working at Spring Creek, most of them lived elsewhere. They didn't live in Seward.
Mhm.
So we'd all go down there on our weeks on, work on our week on our week off, we'd go back home,
Right.
you know, wherever our home was. And I was still running the landscaping business in addition to doing that,
Mhm.
working in the prison. And when you're down there, I mean, there isn't much to do in Seward.
Right.
Seward is like, the way I explained it one time, it's like a drunken Mayberry.
Mhm.
You know, everybody knows everybody's business, and there's nothing to do there but drink.
Mhm.
Um,
And it kind of has that same culture, you know what I mean? Like we're talking about, like working hard, a lot of fishing, working hard, fishing, drinking. You know, like maybe using some drugs.
So I'm 20 years old, and I decide I'm working in a prison. I should be able to go in a bar and drink, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I'm 20 years old and doing that job. You would
I'm
think
an adult.
I deserve to have beers, you know.
Mhm.
So I would just go into bars at 20 years old, risking my job,
Mhm.
you know. Had I gotten caught, I'd have been charged for minor consuming, and I'm sure my bosses at that point in my career would have fired me, you know.
Wow.
Just not even using my head, you know. I would go in the bar and drink, and always with the intention, like I say, I'm going to keep this under control, but always getting out of control,
Yeah.
you know. I was smart enough back then not to drive when I was getting to that point, but down the road I did drink and drive eventually, you know, and got away with it for a long time.
Mhm.
And
That's risky business, man.
that is risky business, and I should know better, you know,
Right.
especially working in that field and doing that job. There's, you know, you start getting that real disappointment with yourself
Yeah.
when you're holding the law up, and you're telling, you know, you're putting on that uniform every day and going to work, and doing something without integrity.
Right.
Just kind
You
of
know.
feels hypocritical in a way.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
But
So,
you couldn't afford to not to be. I mean, in from your point of view, it was either you don't get to have the fun that you want to, or you don't
Feel
get
like
to have
you
the character
deserve.
you want to. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you feel like you deserve these beers, and the ability to drink, but then you're also disappointing yourself. I think that's a pretty common toxic feedback loop. Is that in addiction you're upset that you're in addiction, and then that makes you turn to your addiction to escape that feeling of just like I suck. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I've been there just with marijuana, and just like I don't feel like I can beat this, and then you hate yourself, and it's like a downward spiral.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure you know what that's all about.
You wake up in the morning, you say, man, I have so much things to do today, and I'm so excited to do them. I'm just going to smoke a little bit, just get my day started. Then you, next thing you know, you check your watch, and it's 9:30 p.m., and you haven't done anything.
Yeah.
And dude, then you go in the bathroom, you use the bathroom, you peek yourself in the mirror right there one time, and then you're like, oh my God, and then you just keep walking right on by.
Yeah.
You know, like I've been there.
No,
Yeah.
Been
But
there.
honestly, and that creates a lot of like, and that is a very, like, it's a toxic loop, you know, like that's kind of just a good way to really put it, you know, like, because where else, like, a lot, and especially some of the people we talk to, and you don't really know how to cope with interpersonal things like that, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a lot of strategy for that besides, like, some really hard reflection, you know what I mean? And getting some help, asking for help, but like you said, you're 20.
I'm 20 years old. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Didn't even entertain my mind really to get help at that point.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
knew I had a problem that I would get carried away,
Right.
but it wasn't causing me any issues yet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, other than like I was saying at the cannery, you know, and then people avoiding you, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't find myself in a lot of those situations as a young adult where there were a lot of consequences.
Right. So when does it start? When do you start having some negative consequences in an adult setting?
Well, I ended up joining the Lions Club, and I belonged to the Lions Club for about 30 years, and I'd always look forward to the conventions, you know. And I would go to conventions, and I would, with the intention of I was going to drink and I was going to party and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it became life of the party, you know, just people always wanted to be around me, always wanted me there. If I wasn't where the party was going on, they'd come seek me out, you know, because I was always doing something crazy.
Right.
You know?
The fun guy.
The fun guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly, the fun guy at the party. And that probably caused me some problems, you know, just what people were probably really thinking of me. The people, especially in the organization, that didn't drink and didn't partake, you know,
Right.
or, you know, what they were thinking. But I did move myself up through the ranks in that organization to where I served as district governor for the Lions in the state of Alaska. And that's scary in of itself, because getting in the leadership position, you tell yourself, I'm not going to get in that state. You know, and it's scary because if you do start drinking, you know where it can turn. You know, it's gonna be all bad. And there were a couple instances when I was governor where I did drink too much. You know, but I did kind of keep it under wraps. You know, the one thing I did have going for me was my occupation.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably the only thing that kept me from going full tilt.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Having that occupation as a correctional officer, and knowing I had to provide for my family. I got married at 24 years old, had children at 26 and 28. I had two boys. When I married my wife, she had a 6-year-old son, so I was raising 3 boys, and I wanted to provide for my family, do the best I could for them, and my parents didn't want me to marry the gal I married, of course. And,
Of course.
so my alcoholic thinking was, I'll show you,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
And I married her anyway. Well, that caused some family problems and caused some division in our family, and ended up where my brother and dad basically took control of my business, you know, of our business. So
Mhm.
I had to end up giving them a third of the business apiece because I was single, and we formed a corporation, and they basically took control of it, and that really caused me some problems because
A little
I
resentment,
just,
maybe.
oh, big time resentment, big time resentment, and
Mhm.
that's a killer. You know, that's
Yeah.
just an absolute killer. I'd have nightmares about it, and I just didn't know how to handle that at all, and turned to drinking a little bit more at that time.
Mhm.
And I was unhappy in my marriage eventually after about 3 years. My ex-wife liked to lie and manipulate, and lying's like, that's like one of the things I grew up, you don't lie, you don't steal, you
Mhm.
know. Those are my dad's number two things, you know. You don't
Right.
lie, you don't steal,
Mhm.
even though he's drinking and lying, and
Right.
you know, it's
Yeah.
like a,
And
like
maybe
a,
stealing. Who knows?
I don't
Yeah.
know, you know, it's
Right.
like a, I don't know what I want to call it.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I'm trying to think where I was.
I
going
heard
with
something
that.
the other day too. It was about that. Eric and I, my brother usually does these shows with us, but he's studying for his LSAT right now, right, which is a law school admission test,
Right.
and so his whole life is absorbed in lawyers and law and all this stuff, and so we watch TV shows. They're all about lawyers, right? And this guy's in court, and he's talking, and he goes, "Do as I say, not as I do. The foundation." He gets his hand moving. He goes, "The foundation of hypocrisy." And so, and honestly, dude, it kind of caused a little bit of self-reflection. I'm like thinking about all the people that have said that to me in my life, and I'm like,
When people said that unironically to you?
yes, being very serious to me.
Wow.
Do as I say, not as I do. I'm like, well, that doesn't really make sense. And now I'm sitting there thinking like, dude, it was a weird revelation, but yeah, sorry, that was a tangent, but
So then, being unhappy in the marriage, you know, I even looked more forward to the opportunities to drink that were presented because I could escape those feelings, you
Mhm.
know, and I learned to smash my feelings down with alcohol at that point, you know, and it wasn't an everyday occurrence either, you know,
Mhm.
but like when I would go off to Lions conventions, or I would have, you know, free on my weeks off when I'd have a weekend here or there, I would drink and I would get totally drunk, you know.
Mhm.
I used to like to sing karaoke, thought I was pretty good at it.
Don't we all? Yeah.
But
God, if
I
this
got a
guy
feeling I
sings "Beer
wasn't-
for My Horses" one more time, I'm gonna freak out.
That's funny. Yeah, so anyway, I would go to the local karaoke bar and sing karaoke and carry on, and I would do that on my weeks off, and it got to become kind of common practice. Even before I got married, I would go
Mhm.
over there and sing karaoke, and that's where I met my first wife, was actually singing karaoke, and
She must have liked "Beer for My Horses."
yeah, probably. Moni.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was married to my ex for 18 years, 15 of it pretty unhappy,
Mhm.
and staying in the marriage because I was thinking I was doing the best thing for my children
Mhm.
and providing for them, and eventually just got to the point where I was basically living on the couch, you know.
Yeah.
Not sleeping in the same room, and ended up telling her that, you know, if things didn't change, honestly, I think she's has borderline personality disorder, you know, not blaming my drinking on her at all, but it all my personal relationships she would destroy. She would do sneaky stuff to try to manipulate, like even my family relationships, to where I wouldn't have, she kind of control my time with her, you know, and chase everybody else off. And so it was pretty sad, you know, that and the only way I knew how to deal with the feelings was to drink.
Right.
And
so a combination of a pretty toxic relationship and a real lack of coping skills.
yeah, most definitely. And I ended up getting in a real bad car wreck in 2000, and I don't even remember the exact date. I have problems with timelines. 2008. And I was down in Seattle. I'd taken my nephew down there to see his sister graduate from high school, and I got hit by a motorhome they were going 68 miles an hour, and I was almost stopped for a wreck that happened on the freeway, and they ran over me from behind with that motorhome, never got it off cruise control.
Dang.
Ended up really messing up my back, broke my back in a couple of places, and I've got some real, even still lingering, very bad stenosis in my back, and disc problems, and
Stenosis, like nerve pain, or
yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the calcification in my spine is pinching my nerves off that go down my legs.
Oh,
you know,
oh
so.
wow. Okay.
And so I ended up on pain medication
Mm-hmm.
and got addicted to pain meds really bad. I mean, I would get to where it wasn't controlling my pain, and the doctor would just give me more and more. And one doctor at the time told me, well, you're just habituated, you know, because eventually, after about 3 years of this, I had had enough, and I told him, I told my ex-wife, I said, I'm just going to go in the bedroom, lock the door, don't let my kids in there, and I'm going to get off these things because I am just lethargic, you know, and was tired of living that way. Never abused my prescriptions at that time, but just it got more and more and more. You know, the doctor just kept giving me more and more and more. The doctor
Another
was my
30
drug
days
dealer,
every 30
basically.
days.
You know,
Yeah.
I heard a song like that recently about a doctor being a drug dealer, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. You know, it's like, you know, legalized drugs. You know, and the whole time, you know, I'm keeping my job in the prison. You know. And taking narcotic medication, and I'm sure people seen the difference in my behaviors. You know, I'm sure. But
you said you're not really using it to manage pain anymore, right? Like, did you still
I
have
was
like pretty
using,
severe
I was
pain?
still having pain, and I still have pain today, but it just got carried away. It got to where I was addicted to them.
Yeah.
It was probably more addiction than it was pain management at that point, you know. And so when I went in the bedroom after about 2 days, it being in the bedroom, I just came out and said, I got to go to the hospital. It was, I think my blood pressure was like, I don't remember, like 190 over 140. I mean, it was like screaming up there, you know. It was like terrible. And doctor said, what did you do to yourself? No, you can't do that, you know. But he gave me some meds to drop my blood pressure and to manage that, and some
because you're in a pretty serious withdrawal at this point.
Oh, I did, yeah. I went through and got off the pain medications, and but still drinking from time to time, and ended up going through a divorce with my ex-wife. She decided to get a boyfriend, and our marriage came to an end. And that was a pretty traumatic time in my life. Not having contact with my children. My ex would go file for restraining order, so I couldn't have contact with my kids, and after every day being in their lives, you know. And So the judge would grant a restraining order for 2 weeks, and then I'd go for a long-term hearing, and they would deny it because there's no proof that I'm abusive to my kids
Right.
or my ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it was insane. I think there was like 30 protection orders filed for within the period of this divorce, all keeping my kids away from me, and my drinking got pretty bad at that time.
Yeah.
I would just chase the feelings away with alcohol,
So how old are you at this point now? When all this is starting, it seems like we're getting ready to come to a head here. Like everything's.
that was in 2011 when that happened. That happened in 2011.
Okay.
It started getting bad, and met my new wife in 2012 while I was drinking. We met, and she's an alcoholic too, and we decided that we were going to quit drinking. So we quit drinking for a period of about 3 years. So we didn't touch any alcohol at all, and just managing on self-will, And one night, just the most peculiar thing, I just call it a peculiar mental twist. My brain tries to tell me it's okay to drink alcohol, and so we're making tamales and rolling them up at Christmas time, and she goes, "It'd be nice to have white wine with the tamales," and like, yeah, that would be, So she went and got white wine, and we had tamales and white wine. Well, within a week, it's vodka and it's everything else, and then right back to where we started, and it's insanity. That your mind will tell you that you can control it, even when you have all this experience that tells you, no, you can't control it, Still experiencing pain at that time. I got to a point where I couldn't sleep at night, just from the pain in my back, and went out and even bought a $10,000 bed to sleep in.
Wow.
One of these hydraulic beds with each side will raise or lower, and different pressures, whatever, and even that wasn't controlling it to where I could get some sleep. So I went back and seen another doctor, got back on pain medication again, and that just got way out of control. My wife got onto pain medications she ended up blowing out her Achilles tendon, and had to have surgery on that, and ended up on pain meds. So then we're both drinking, doing pain meds, and out of control. I ended up retiring from corrections, and I was drinking pretty heavily when I retired. Felt like my work was starting to suffer pretty good. I was ready to call it quits. I pretty embarrassed about my situation. People didn't know at the job exactly how bad my situation was with the pain medications and the drinking, and ended up before I retired, I ended up getting stopped one night for driving while intoxicated. I had ran a red light, and I ended up getting arrested and taken to jail where I worked for DUI, and ended up getting a reckless driving conviction out of it. I was right on the border of a .08, so I'm surprised I wasn't more intoxicated than that, but I was only right at the legal limit. I felt like I was more intoxicated than that, but.
So you said in 2012 you met your other wife. So how old were you then?
So I was born in 68.
68. So like 30s, right?
No, 40s. In my 40s.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And so then you're sober for 3 years.
Yeah. So
and then you hit. So this is about 2015 then, when you're picking back up, and by then, you're late 40s.
Yeah.
So this all, it's just, because obviously we see people that hit that point at different times throughout their lives. You know what I mean? It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's more of a unique story in the fact that like things aren't like you're maintaining the job, like you get sober for a point of time, kind of on your own, like you're doing your thing until about almost 50,
Mm-hmm.
really. And so then, okay, so yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that
It
originally.
started self-destructing at the time that I got the divorce. I
Yeah.
mean, in 2011, it started as far as my addiction, it got pretty bad.
Hmm. So yeah, what's it look like day to day in 2011? Like, are you drinking every day at this point, or is it still
oh,
kind of
yeah.
on the week? Yeah,
Oh yeah,
every day.
yeah, pretty much. Well, yeah, pretty much every day.
Mhm.
2011, 2012.
I found. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I found it interesting that originally when you met your new wife in 2011, right, or
Mhm.
12.
12.
11.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you guys kind of had this peer support system, kind of a little bit within
Mhm.
yourselves. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, we're not going to do this. But then, as one of you fell off, the other kind of followed, and then they
Exactly.
fell off, and so it's almost that working together, kind of falling together, and
That's our history.
Yeah.
We will go through a period of being sober, and then one of us will fall off, and the other one will go behind them.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because all it takes is that one little suggestion, because
Exactly.
you're both thinking it, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So
our minds are both working the same, telling us it's okay that
Yeah.
you can drink one, and
Yeah.
we both have the same problem.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's our typical is one of us falling off, and then the other one following behind, and that became a pattern for us.
Hmm.
And that continued pretty heavily the last couple of years,
Hmm.
and we would go through periods where we wouldn't drink, and then one of us fall off, the other one would join, and last time we started was about probably it was probably about a 6-month period, maybe a little longer than that, prior to us going to. One thing that did happen was, in the meantime, I decided to quit taking opiates again, and I got on a Suboxone program
Hmm.
through a local doctor, and that happened over. Let's see, it would not this last February, but the February before.
Hmm.
So I was on the Suboxone program and quit taking opiates, and that was going good. But I continued to drink, even though they warn you,
Right.
hey, look, if you drink with taking Suboxone, you can kill yourself, But
Hmm.
my mind tells me, oh, they just say that.
Right.
That's not the case.
They say it to appease the
They say-
lawyers.
And so,
Yeah.
my brain will tell me anything
oh yeah.
to go pick up a drink,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I continued to drink while on Suboxone. I would stop the night before I would go see the doctor, go into the doctor's office with the shakes, get my Suboxone medication for the week, go through the thing, and then as soon as I got out of the appointment, be hitting a drink of vodka to stop me from having the shakes.
Hmm.
It was getting to that point, and so very, very, very serious.
Yeah.
Causing my body to eat itself from the inside out. Drinking and doing Suboxone at the same time, and got to the point where sleeping maybe an hour every couple of days. Afraid if I went to sleep I was going to die.
Hmm.
Wow.
Pretty serious stuff.
That's got to be
Yeah.
some serious anxiety too, along with
Very,
that.
very serious going on. Very serious anxiety. And
What's your relationship with your kids look like at this point?
I've always had a pretty decent relationship with my boys.
Hmm.
Always tried to hide it from them.
Right.
They knew what was going on because there was important things that happened that I missed.
Hmm.
One of my boys helped form a Lions Club, and they had a charter night for that, and I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I was intoxicated and drunk, and I wasn't going to show my face there, And
Mm-hmm.
that's embarrassing. That's
Yeah.
embarrassing. Have to tell them you're sick or something that isn't true,
And then maybe they know too, so they're like, "Okay, Dad." And you say,
Exactly.
That's gotta hurt
Exactly.
internally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, or missing family birthday parties or different things like that. Just making excuses to hide from people,
Mm-hmm.
secluding.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So are you getting even more separated from, potential supports or people that you talk to regularly? You're just kind of closing in.
Exactly. It was just me and my wife.
Yeah.
And finally come to the realization that we were killing ourselves. And I'd actually been to the hospital once with what I thought was heart issues, and the doctor worked me up. He came in there and said, "You need to stop drinking. If you don't stop drinking, you're going to kill yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And so I quit for a period and started searching on the internet. This is my alcoholic brain at work. I started searching on the internet how to make my liver better, and I started reading about chaga. So chaga is a fungus that grows on a birch tree, and it's the highest antioxidant known to man. Basically, you go out and you take the part off the birch tree, you grind it up, you make tea out of it, you drink it. Well, after a couple of months, my blood work was looking a whole lot better.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
So, what's my alcoholic brain tell me? It tells me that
I'm good to go
if,
now.
if I can just drink the chaga, I can drink the vodka with the chaga, and
Chaser.
everything will be fine.
Yeah.
But
Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right?
Right.
To the rationalization part, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I
I've
can
been
see
there. Like
Yeah.
it's just
Liquor
one
tea.
time. Yeah, but then
There's a story in the AA book about a guy who decides he can mix his whiskey with milk, and as long as he mixes it with milk, it's okay because he won't get intoxicated. And we think that's far fetched. When you first read something like that, you think, come on, that can't be.
Right.
But when you compare it to what I did,
Mm-hmm.
it ain't too far fetched.
Right.
Basically what that tells me is that I have a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
know?
And just the way we can rationalize things, you know what I mean, as human beings in general, like, it sounds like, oh, that sounds so wild, but, like, I mean, a lot of people rationalize a lot of things, either do things they want to do or have things they want to have, and, like, when you hear them just off the tip, like, yeah, that sounds really crazy.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty abnormal, but we do it every day.
Right.
plus
Yeah.
you gotta understand that addiction muscle's been built up. Like it wants to flex. It wants what it wants, and it's
Mhm.
been getting stronger all this time. So now it takes even more effort than, just starting at the beginning and saying,
Definitely.
no, it's like becomes that need that we talk about. You were saying it's mental illness. I think it's like a mental priority
Mhm.
that is super hard to change. Like it's basically what you're saying. It is a disease. Addiction is, and so you can go to some pretty illogical places in the
Right.
rationalization realm.
At that point in my life, I don't believe that alcoholism is a disease.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's a weakness. At that
Oh, yeah.
point. At that point, I still
in your
believe I'm
life,
just a weak
yeah,
individual.
Yeah, right.
I
So you're
believe
kind of
I'm weak.
producing some shame within yourself. there,
Exactly.
too,
Oh,
yeah.
the shame circle is it's a spiral like you talk about.
Mm.
I-
Dude, that
I don't-
toxic circle, dude, is like, because like we were talking about, in that toxic circle, you find all the shame and the guilt and all these other emotions that just kind of drive you back to your only real coping mechanism, which is your drinking or your
Right.
drug use or your addiction, whatever that is. And dude, that thing's just like a carousel, man, because they're like, shame, yep, send her on. Guilt, send her on. Self-loathing, yep, got it, send her on.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, man, you're just spinning your wheels, really not going anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, my wife and I decided after the second time I end up in the hospital that it's time that we quit or we're going to kill ourselves. I mean,
Mhm.
my wife was at a point where she was in the hospital 4 or 5 times, you know, and the last time wasn't looking good at all, you know.
Yeah.
And we're like, we have to stop, you
Mm.
know, got to quit. So we come up with a plan to, she's going to go into care transitions
Mhm.
and get some help with detoxing. And then when she's done there, I'm going to go in.
Mhm.
And she had had some treatment through Serenity in the past. And so once she got done there, well, when I dropped her off to get treatment, I decided that I got 5 days before I have to go in there. So what's the first thing I do is go get a bottle, right?
All right.
And so I go get a bottle and drink it. And the very first night she was in there, I end up in the ditch in my car. First time I ever been in the ditch in my car, and I was severely intoxicated. And I just thought I need help, you
Mhm.
know, and it just was like at that point in my life where I'm like, God, I need help, you know.
Mhm.
You cry out. Eventually you get to that point where you cry out for something to help you.
Mhm.
And I sat in my car for about the middle of winter. I sat there for about 2.5 hours in my car before the trooper showed up.
Mhm.
I knew I knew I was going to end up in jail, but I could have walked away. I could have walked home. I could have did all kinds of but
Mhm.
I sat there and waited. And ended up, it took me to a while when I got a DUI. And, you know, you start, like I was talking about before, about doing that occupation for 25 years and integrity being so important. And here you are breaking it, you know.
Yeah.
It's tough. That's a hard thing to swallow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, once reality really kicks you in the face, it's like I'm not going to be ignored anymore, and you have to accept it. Then it's kind of all at once. You're pushing back those feelings, pushing back these warning lights, basically, and all of a sudden you check on it, and it's terrifying, really.
yeah, you know, you're at the point where you're out driving around a car, could kill someone, you know.
Yeah.
Paranoid, you know, looking in your rearview mirror, every car you see, you think it's the cops. Are you going to go down a different road? You're going to do, I mean, just insane, just insanity,
Mhm.
just plain insanity. And so I ended up in care transitions after my wife, and made a decision while I was in there that I was going to go to Serenity House and get treatment.
Mhm.
So I went into the treatment center, and the first thing out of my mouth when I got there was, "This ain't a disease. I'm a weak person. This is not a disease."
Mhm.
And I always had that thought, you know, just all I need to do is just say no. You know, that's what Nancy Reagan said. You know?
Oh my goodness.
Nancy It ain't quite that easy.
Yeah,
You know? It's not
yeah.
quite that easy.
Mhm.
And I thank God for care transitions. You know, those people are they're amazing.
Mhm.
And if a person is really serious about wanting help and wanting to stop drinking, and I would suggest that place to anybody to go for medically assisted withdrawal.
Mhm.
You know, people care about you. And Dr. Wallachek over there, or PA Wallachek, he was a godsend to me, man.
Mhm.
Just
He's one of our favorites too, actually.
that dude right there, I have nothing but good to say about him.
Mhm.
And tremendous help for me. And when I ended up in Serenity House, I really started learning about addiction. Never had really stopped to study it, I guess.
Mhm.
You know, never wanted to look at myself. Always so busy looking at other people or telling other people things, you know. Like when I worked in the prison, people would come in for DUI and I would be consoling, you know, a little bit of this ain't the end of the world, you know. You can recover from this. And You just need to get a handle on your problem, you know. So I'm telling these people this, you know, the whole time. Before they leave, I'm telling them, you know, what you need to do is get a car and pull it up in your driveway, an old car that has no wheels. And, oh, so I can't drive it? No, that's not it. That's not it. Just, I said the driver's door needs to work. And, how come the driver's door? Well, that's the only thing that needs to work is just the driver's door. You only need to have seats in it, really, because you're never going to sit in it. So when you get that feeling of that you want to go drink, I said you just go walk out there and open up the car door and stick your head in there and start slamming it on it until the feeling goes away. Kind of like pain compliance, you know. You get a little pain, you're going to comply, but it ain't that easy either, you know. That's just me wanting to solve somebody else's problems and not my own, not look at my own problem, you know. So that's where I was at in life, and I'm sure you guys have heard the good thing about getting sober is you get your feelings back. The bad thing is you get your feelings back.
Right. Yeah.
I sat there and had emotion after emotion in Serenity House, you know, having to deal with the emotions of getting sober, you know, and it's pretty, it's work, but it's well worth it, you know.
Yeah. What was your experience with that? Because like a general theme of what we've been talking about today is you suppressing, you know, kind of a lot of those emotions with your drinking. So like when all that's coming back to the surface, what's your experience like with that?
Pretty overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And never have really dealt with any of my own issues, you know, never took time to work on me ever.
Right.
So you build these little bonds with people as you're going into treatment, and one of them I carried over from Care Transitions, a person that was there with me, that both decided to get treatment, you know, and so we both end up there, and within a couple of days he's getting kicked out of the place, you know, and I get irate, you know, I get mad, because to me, what's on the other side of that place, if you go back out, to death, you know. And so I'm throwing dishes in the sink. I'm supposed to be washing the dishes, and I'm throwing them around, and the counselor's like, what's wrong with you? You're kicking him out. He don't need to be kicked out. So she's telling me, you like to solve other people's problems. I noticed since you got here, you like to solve everybody else's problem, but not your own problems. And I'm bawling, you know, and she's like, do you save any tears for yourself? I'm like, wow. I go downstairs, I'm packing my crap, I'm going to leave, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? You're packing your crap, you're going to leave, no, unpack my stuff. You know, so that's what's going through my head the first couple of days there, you know. Those kind of things that, lots of emotions. You know, and not knowing how to handle them and how to deal with them.
Right.
So, pretty intense.
Yeah. One of our favorite quotes is, "It's not all sunshine and rainbows." You know, it's healing, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
Man, it's hard.
It
very,
is hard
very
work.
hard.
It is hard
difficult
work.
stuff. But just, I feel like when you come out on the other side of it, you know, it's kind of one of those things like, it's like the first time putting on glasses when you've been wearing blinders. You know, like the world just kind of like opens up wide. Like, you know, you take for granted the sky is blue, but then you walk out of there and you're like, holy, the sky is blue, man.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So I'm there. I'm not getting a whole lot, you know. The first few days, here in comes one of these people that's gonna tell us about AA step work, you know. And the first words out of his mouth are basically like, what your family's doing at home is none of your effing business, and what your this is doing, what your wife's doing is none of your effing business. And I'm thinking, man alive, what is going on here? Now this is so crazy. They got this guy coming in here cussing, and I'm like, this is totally unprofessional. You know, that's what I'm thinking. I hate this
Right.
guy. I hate him right away. You know, I hate him. I'm like telling him, man, that guy is so messed up. Why do they have that guy coming in here? Until the light bulb clicks, you know, and you realize that all this time you've been manipulating situations and people in your life to get what you want because you're selfish and self-centered, and you don't realize that when you're in that without looking at it.
Right.
You know, you don't realize how selfish and self-centered you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and when it finally clicks, when the light bulb clicks, you're like, yeah, it's not everybody else in the world, it's me. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's when you're in the throes of addiction and you have to feed that it kind of becomes, you have to be the priority. Because if you don't have what's keeping you going, well, everything just is miserable for you. So
Right.
you have to figure out a way to fit that into everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that that's kind of a habit that would be built up, is that, all right, I'll take care of me first, and then we can do whatever it is that needs to be done. So I know you
Maybe.
yeah. I know you
Maybe.
talked about, Aaron, you talked about how just because you overcome an addiction to something or something you struggle with, your regular problems don't go away. You know, that's just the first level.
Yeah.
But it sounds like with what you went through, that you had people to kind of help guide you through that readjustment to, this isn't how the world is going to work anymore. Well, how am I going to make it work? My structure's gone. That doesn't work. So you have to have something to replace it. So it sounds like that was more of a smooth transition than trying to figure everything out again on your own versus that kind of support.
right.
Yeah.
It definitely has been a great support network. The whole organization with Serenity House, all the way, I like the way that they have their program set up with care transitions, and then they have the house, and they have the outpatient treatment here, as well as Diamond Willow, which is where I'm staying right now.
Right.
You know, so I own a home, or a mobile home in Nikiski with some property and a shop, and while I'm getting ready to get out of Serenity House, I'm doing a relapse prevention plan, and things that are on there are like, my wife and I following each other in relapse, like I talked about. Transportation's an issue.
Right.
I have to get to classes, that's an issue. And so I'm looking at this thing and I'm just thinking, it was like I
lot
was
of
being
barriers.
directed by praying about it and directed by God that I need to go over to Diamond Willow and live there. You know, and I'm like, well, what's up with that? You know, and then I start evaluating how that can alleviate some of those things in the relapse prevention, and I'm like, there's a strong network of people there that are sober right now. My wife and I, who knows if I'll fall off or if she would, you know, and one of us would follow the other one like our habit has been the whole time. So I made a decision to go over there and live out of Diamond Willow until such that our recovery was in a position where we can come back and live together,
Right.
you know, and in healthy, because I mean, just one person recovering is hard enough. You put two, and the odds that two people get sober, you know, are astronomical. You know, they say eight out of 10 people that go through treatment, I think, relapse within the first year.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, a lot of our stories, there's very rare where it's like, yeah, I went once, got her kicked, and I've been sober 50 years now.
Right.
You know, it's,
Right.
and sadly, I mean, it's not that it's like an expected form, because people do it, you know, and it's like, and that's the goal, you know, like the goal is not to be like, oh, you know, I'm going to come out and I'll probably relapse and then I'll be back. Like, there has to be kind of this balance, you know, between like, obviously the goal is to remain sober for the length of it, you know, for the long haul. But the reality is that it's an everyday battle.
Right.
You know, it's an everyday conscious thought, difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I hope people that realize that do relapse, so that for no better word, getting back on the horse is save your life. Don't be so proud and so thinking that people are going to be looking at you funny because you've relapsed, to not get back in there. Because people are worth it.
Right.
And what I've seen in the rooms of recovery is that they don't shoot their wounded.
Yeah.
They accept them with open arms and understand because they've been there.
Right.
Yeah, so if there's anyone listening out there who's ashamed of having fallen off the wagon, or they feel like everyone's given up on them, you're wrong. You're just wrong. And there's a place you can go, and the people there they have open arms, more or less, and they'll take care of you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I find that to be my major purpose in life right now, is to fit myself to be of maximum service to other people. I'm 7 months sober, and just was asked to be a sponsor for somebody who's
Cool.
younger in recovery than me, and help them through the steps. And I think that's going to be something that's important in my life. I think helping others and being actively participating in helping other people achieve sobriety will be something that will help keep me sober.
Right. Definitely. All right. Thank you so much, Richard, for coming in and telling your story with us today. It was really fun to hear. And it's, everybody's story, I feel like we leave here with a little bit. Obviously, as you add more things on in this experience for us, because we started doing this just over a year ago, the way at least my perspective has progressed. With everybody's story, you just kind of get it's just a new appreciation for people in general. You know what I mean? People that struggle, people that don't, and just people. Because kind of realizing that like you said, the world exists outside of you. You know what I mean? And I feel like in our everyday lives, we kind of get caught up in that sometimes. You know what I mean? In our stuff and what we're doing, and we heard from, I think it was somebody else we had a podcast with a long time ago. It was everybody could take some time to do the 12 steps and be totally okay. Yeah,
that was Zach. He literally said, "Some people, I wish they would get a problem so they could work the steps and fix themselves."
Right.
Here's something I would like to throw out there, and it's that there is people in my occupation and in law enforcement type careers that have an issue that are afraid to look at it for fear of what it might do to them professionally. I would just tell them that it's different than what you might perceive it to be to go get help.
Right.
Yeah. I was afraid of going to get help when I was in that career for fear of who I might see in an AA room. And today I don't care who knows that I'm an alcoholic. Because I see it totally different than I did from the other side. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's crucial when you get into occupations like that are, the tough guys, the guys that don't really have problems. These are the problem solvers. These are people we call for help. I get called for help. I don't call for help kind of guys,
Exactly.
Or at least expectation of those people, at least from a social perspective. But
and it's funny that by being open about those insecurities, it kind of frees you from them. They don't control you anymore.
Huge step.
Because you're not fighting yourself and the disease of addiction.
Right.
Definitely. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Richard.
guys.
This was Aaron and Coburn.
Story.
Yeah, we appreciate you,
All right, guys.
man.
Definitely.
This is you and I for the Kenai.